Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaaya. Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 6 of Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai. Before explaining the verse, I'll just give a little bit of background which will make it clearer. That is, in this verse, Bhagavan refers to Aruṇācala as kāmāri. Kāmāri is a compound of two words, kāma and ari. Kāma means desire, particularly carnal desire, lust, sexual desire. And ari means enemy. Kāmāri is one of the names of Lord Shiva because he is the killer of karma, of desire, particularly of sexual desire. This is related to a Puranic story. I can't remember, well, many of Puranic stories, very slightly different versions told in different Puranas, but the basic story is Lord Shiva was doing tapas. He was absorbed in samadhi, and for some purpose, all the gods and rishis wanted to wake him up from his samadhi and wanted him to marry the goddess Parvati. So they sent Kama, the god of desire, to wake him from his samadhi. And Kama, a bit like the European idea of Cupid. Kama has arrows of, he shoots the arrow of love into the heart of his victims, and thereby he arouses the desire in them. So he tried to do this with Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva simply opened his third eye, which is the eye of knowledge, the eye of jnana, and burnt him. That is the tattva, the principle behind this is that desire is born of ignorance. Desire arises only when we identify ourselves as a body. And so long as we identify this body as I, one of the basic desires is this carnal desire, sexual desire. But so in the fire of jnana, all desires will be destroyed. That is the tattva of the story. So from that time, Lord Shiva has been called Kāmāri. But in order for the world to continue, karma is necessary. I mean, the world runs by desire, and all the different species reproduce by because of sexual desire. So without karma, the world will not continue running, will not continue as it is. So the gods then prayed to Lord Shiva to restore karma to life. But already the form of karma has been destroyed. So Lord Shiva restored him to life, but without a form. So he's one of the names of karma is ṇeṅṅaṇad. ṇeṅṅaṇad means the bodiless one. So both these, Bhagavan uses both this term kāmāri and ṇeṅṅaṇad in this verse. So that's just the background to understand the context of, I mean, the Puranic background to the terms used in this verse. We don't know the exact circumstances under which Bhagavan composed this verse, but this verse is a great blessing for many of us, because so long as we identify ourselves as I am this body, it is natural for us to have sexual desire, and it's one of the strongest desires there is, because the reproduction of the species, of any species, depends upon this sexual reproduction. Well, not all species, but most species, whether animal or plant, they reproduce by sexual means. So most animals have this this carnal desire is sort of hardwired into the body. When we take the body to be I, we are subject to this desire. And if we're trying to follow this spiritual path, we're trying to turn our mind within. So anything that draws our mind outwards is an obstacle in this path. And so all desires of any sort are an obstacle in this path. Only when we are willing to give up all desires will we be willing to surrender ourselves completely. And we cannot investigate ourselves without thereby surrendering ourselves. That is, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent do we subside. So we can bring about complete self-surrender only by means of self-investigation. So we need to surrender ourselves, and in order to surrender ourselves, we first need to surrender our desires, or at least our desires need to be greatly reduced before we will become willing to surrender ourselves. So this that is, there's nothing wrong in the sexual act itself. That is how the species reproduce. But in the spiritual path, the desire is the problem. Not the act itself, but the desire for that is the problem. So that's why many spiritual aspirants choose to live a life of celibacy. They become sannyasis or brahmacharis, and they try to maintain celibacy. But even if outwardly one is celibate, still the problem of desire remains. We can't overcome the desire just by being celibate. Celibacy may help in sometimes. Sometimes celibacy can also be counterproductive, because by trying to deny the desire can become even stronger. So there's no easy way to overcome this desire. Ultimately, we will overcome this desire completely only when we cease to identify ourselves as I in this body. In other words, only when ego is destroyed do we really overcome this problem of sexual desire. So Bhagavan, we don't, as I say, we don't know the exact circumstances under which Bhagavan composed this verse, but this is a verse that many of us will relate to, because this is a problem that we all face in this spiritual path, whether we are sannyasis or brahmacharis on one hand, or whether we are living a married life on the other hand. We all face this problem of this desire, because like all desires, desire cannot be overcome by satisfying it. Bhagavan says in Guru Vachaka Kavai that he says there's no bottomless pit like desire. However much you try to fulfill the desire remains. He also compares gratifying desires to pouring petrol on a fire. So there's no easy way to overcome desire. It's only by means of this self-investigation that we slowly wean our mind off its outward-going inclinations. In other words, we weaken our Vishaya vasanas, and eventually the Sat vasana, the love just to be as we actually are, once that becomes stronger than all our Vishaya vasanas combined, then only will we be willing to surrender ourselves completely. And only when we're willing to surrender ourselves completely will we be able to turn our mind completely within, and thereby dissolve forever back into the heart. So now, coming to the verse itself, what Bhagavan says in this verse is, kāmāri yeṇṭṛunī ṇeṅṅaṇad leṉṭṛṟumē kathittiḍap paḍugiṉṭṛā yāmāme yuṇakkidu vāmāveṉ ṭṛaiyuṟu śrī Aruṇācala dhīraṇē śūraṇē yāyiṇum vallaṇaṅgaṉ kāmāri yāhumuṉ kālaraṇ śaraṇbuhu karuttiṉuṭ puhavalaṉē. So the meaning of this verse, I'll go through it sentence by sentence. The first sentence is kāmāri yeṇṭṛunī ṇeṅṅaṇad leṉṭṛṟumē kathittiḍap paḍugiṉṭṛā. That means you are always described by devotees as kāmāri, the slayer of karma, the slayer of carnal desire. You're always described by devotees. ṇeṅṭṛā means by devotees. So the devotees of Aruṇācala, the devotees of Shiva, always refer to him as kāmāri. And then he says in the next sentence, yāmāme. Means it is. It also, it's often used in the sense of yes. That if you want to say yes in Tamil, you say or amam. It is, it is. So in this sentence, Bhagavan says, yāmāme. Yes, yes, true. That is, may means the truth or reality. Yes, yes, this is true. So he's affirming what the devotees say. But then in the next sentence, he expresses a doubt. Ṇeṅṅaṇad ḍṛaiyuṛu Aruṇācala. Yāyiṇum means, it's a compound of two words. Ayam means doubt, and urum is the third person neuter future form of the verb uru, which means to be, to happen, or to occur. So yāyiṇum means doubt happens, but it's used here in the sense of, because often the third person neuter future form of verbs is often used in a tense neutral and person neutral sense. So in here it means I doubt. Though I is not specifically there, it is what is implied. When he said doubt arises, it implies I doubt. Yuṇakkidu āmā. As I said, means it is. It also means it is suitable. So the interrogative form of is āmā. So āmā means is it suitable? So yuṇakku, for you, idu, this, is it suitable? So the doubt arises, is this suitable? Is this appropriate for you? In other words, I doubt whether this is suitable for you, Aruṇācaleshwara. Aruṇācaleshwara, that is, Ishwara means God, the Lord, the ruler. Aruṇācaleshwara is a compound. In Sanskrit, it's Aruṇācaleshwara. In Tamil, it becomes Aruṇācaleswara. No, actually, no, the ver is not there. It's lēśśuraṇē. But that's just a Tamil form of the Sanskrit Aruṇācaleshwara. That is often Sanskrit words can take on various different forms in Tamil. Then in the next sentence he says, this is the final sentence, and it's the longest sentence. Yāmāyi. Yāmāyi means if it is suitable. So he's explaining his doubt. If this is suitable, ṇeṅṅaṇad dhīraṇē śūraṇē yāyiṇum vallaṇaṅgaṉ kāmāri yāhumuṉ kālaraṇ śaraṇbuhu karuttiṉuṭ puhavalaṉē. Yāmāyi, as they say, means if it is suitable. Engam means how. So he's asking a question here. Dhīraṇē, śūraṇē, yāyiṇum, vallaṇaṅgaṉ. That means that um, mighty bodiless one. As I said, Kāma is often described as Anganam, the bodiless one. So how can that mighty bodiless one, uh, uh, dhīraṇē, śūraṇē, yāyiṇum, means though he is indeed brave and powerful. So we all know how powerful this carnal desire is. It's so, and it's not only powerful, it's also very brave, because Kama went and he tried to arouse that sexual desire even in Lord Shiva. So he's very brave and he's very powerful. But however brave and powerful he may be, though he's so brave and powerful, how does is he able to enter? Puhavalaṉē means how is he? Puhavalaṉē means how is he able to enter karuttiṉuṭ within the mind, but takes kāmāri yāhumuṉ kālaraṇ śaraṇbuhu. So how is he able to enter within a mind that takes refuge in the fortress of the feet of you who are kāmāri, who are the slayer of karma? So Aruṇācala is the slayer of karma. If we take refuge in the fortress of his feet, how can this bodiless one, this karma, how does, though he's very brave and powerful, how can he enter the heart of one who takes refuge at the feet of Lord Shiva, Aruṇācala? Aruṇācala is, of course, Lord Shiva. So this is a very nice prayer, because we all believe that Bhagavan will enable us to overcome all our desires, including this carnal desire. So we have come to him, we are taking refuge at his feet by trying to follow the path that he's shown us, by trying to turn our mind within. This is how we are trying our best to surrender ourselves to him, to take refuge at his feet. So when such is the case, when we're taking refuge, when we are attempting to take refuge at his feet, how is it that this karma comes and enters our mind? So this is a very nice prayer for anyone who is, as I think most of us are. If anyone finds, I mean, of course, we're not troubled by this desire all the time. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm just not able to overcome this desire." None of us are able to overcome this desire so long as there is ego. But this desire isn't always there in our mind. Most of the time, our attention is on so many other things. But there are times when it rises, and it rises very powerfully. So how can it rise if we're taking refuge at his feet? So this is a prayer to Aruṇācala to give us the strength to surrender ourselves completely to him, and thereby remain unaffected, untouched by this desire. If we do not surrender ourselves completely to him, we are sure to fall a victim to this and to so many other desires. So this is a beautiful prayer. Just to summarize the meaning of the whole prayer again, what Bhagavan says is, you are always described by devotees as kāmāri, the slayer of carnal desire. Yes, yes, true. However, I doubt, the word however isn't there, but it's implied. However, I doubt whether this is suitable for you, Aruṇācaleshwara. If it is suitable, how is it that mighty bodiless one, Kama, though he is indeed brave and powerful, how is he able to enter within a mind that takes refuge in the fortress of the feet of you who are the slayer of karma? So that is Bhagavan's that is the prayer that Bhagavan has given us whenever we are much troubled by this carnal desire. This is a very nice prayer for us. This prayer itself, it will uh, um, give us the strength to to remain unswayed by this desire. But we must pray with our full heart, of course, and no no prayer. A prayer is not just words. A prayer is an intense longing of the heart. So if we have true longing to overcome this and all other desires, this verse is a very, very powerful prayer that we can use um, to as a focus for our desire, to channel our desire means our sincere desire to overcome all desire. That desire to overcome all desire is what is known as bhakti, the love to surrender ourselves completely. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaaya.
There are a couple of questions here. Michael, should we start with the ones in the email?
Yes, if anyone's asked any question about this verse, then maybe we should start with that first, but otherwise we can start with the email ones.
Yes, I think there are, anyway, there are two here. We'll go through them. The first is, if I understand correctly, sattvasanas play an important role for us to seek what is within ourselves. Does that mean we need to cultivate sattvasanas so that we can attend to ourselves often? Apart from focusing on good thoughts, actions, and sattvic food, do we need to do anything specific?
Sattvasana is the love to subside and be as we actually are. So the means by which we can subside and be as we actually are is by holding fast to our own being. In other words, attending to our own being, to the mere awareness I am, to that fundamental awareness I am. That is the means to be as we actually are. So the sattvasana is that inclination or love just to attend to nothing other than our own being and thereby to be as we actually are. The most effective way to cultivate this is, of course, by the practice of self-investigation. By trying more and more to attend to ourselves, we strengthen the desire to, the inclination to attend to ourselves, the love to attend to ourselves. Because this is the nature, we need to understand the nature of vasanas. Vasanas are the seeds that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments, and so on. So what we say about vasanas also applies to likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on, which are all just the sprouted form of the vasanas. Vasanas are all these desires in their seed form. The vasanas have no strength of their own. Whatever strength they have is strength they derive from us. And so we impart strength into vasanas by allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So that is why we have such strong Vishaya vasanas, because for countless lives we've been allowing ourselves to be swayed by so many different Vishaya vasanas. So the Vishaya vasanas are very strong. Now we want to cultivate this sattvasana, the love just to be as we actually are. So in order to cultivate this, we need to allow ourselves to be swayed by this vasana, this inclination. And being swayed by it means attending to ourselves. So attending to ourselves is it's the only really effective way to cultivate this sattvasana. However, this practice of self-investigation, we can support our efforts to attend to ourselves by studying Bhagavan's teachings, thinking about them, that is by the Sravana and Manana, these are the Sravana and Manana are not a substitute for Nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means the actual practice of self-attentiveness. So Sravana and Manana can never be a substitute, but they are powerful aids to self-attentiveness. That is, because we've got very strong inclinations to go outwards, most of the time our mind is going outward. Most of the time we are attending to things other than ourselves. So if we want to wean our mind off its outward going inclinations, reading Bhagavan's teachings, listening to Bhagavan's teachings, thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, these are great aids because these strengthen our inclination to go within. And I think the question also mentioned sattvic food. Bhagavan has said, yes, of all the outward restrictions, mitta, sattvika, ahara, niyama is the best of all, because by this we enhance the sattvic quality of the mind. Of course, this is, again, it's just an aid. It's not, we cannot bring about self-attentiveness just by eating sattvic food, but it will put the mind in such a condition that it will be most suitable for making that effort to turn within. But making the effort to turn within is absolutely essential. So, mitta, sattvika, ahara, niyama, Bhagavan says in the 9th paragraph of Nana. Mitta means moderate. That means moderate both in quality and quantity. So we shouldn't be eating excessive quantities of food. We shouldn't be eating the food should be moderate. It should be what is required for sustaining the life in the body. We should eat to live, not live to eat, as they sometimes say. So we should eat food in moderate quantities and moderate quality of food. We shouldn't be going for very, very tasty food. Any simple food, what is sufficient to nourish the body, should be healthy, simple. And as Bhagavan says, sattvika. Sattvika means it's conducive to that sattvic quality. The sattvic quality means the quality. Sattva, the literal meaning of sattva is beingness. Sat means being. Tva is a suffix that is like ness in English. So it's the beingness quality. It's the quality of calm, calmness and clarity. That's a state of mind in which there's an inclination to be. So that quality of mind can, that is the basic quality of the mind, the natural quality of the mind, we can say. When the mind is not disturbed by rajas, the outward going activity, or tamas, for dullness, when it's not under the sway of these, what remains is sattva. That's our natural state of just being as we actually are. So anything that disturbs that sattva is either rajasic or tamasic. And the word ahara means, generally it's taken to mean food, but the actual etymology of ahara is what is taken in. So it implies not only the food that we consume, or what we drink, or anything that we consume is ahara, but it also implies what we consume through the 5 senses. So if we are constantly, for example, if we're constantly watching violent movies or movies with lots of with sexual content and so on, these are not sattvic. If we should be feeding our senses with sattvic content, thinking about Bhagavan's teaching, reading Bhagavan's teachings, or anything that is conducive to a calm and peaceful state of mind. Anything that doesn't kindle passions in the mind, that is sattvic. So it applies not only to the food we consume, but also what we consume through our five senses, what we see through the eyes, hear through the ears, and so on. So all these are aids, but ultimately these are aids to self-investigation. But none of them can be a substitute for self-investigation. So self-investigation is what is most important. That is the direct means to cultivate this sattvasana. In order to attend to ourselves, we need a certain degree of sattvasana. But if we want to strengthen that certain degree of sattvasana, that has been implanted in us by Bhagavan's grace. We wouldn't be here if we weren't interested in this subject. So we all have some interest, at least to try to be self-attentive. But we have to cultivate this by patient and persistent practice. No matter how many times the mind goes outwards under the sway of its Vishaya vasanas, we need to try to bring it back and turn it back within. And by constant practice, we gradually strengthen the sattvasana. This is what Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nana, when he says, "What does it matter however many thoughts rise? As and when each thought arises, it's necessary to investigate to whom." In other words, it's necessary to turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom everything else appears. And if we go on, and once we turn our attention back within, we should then try to hold on to that self-attentiveness. But sooner or later, it's again going to slip back out, and again we have to bring it back. So he says, Ipadi paraka, by practicing in this way, manataku tan pirapititil tangi shakti, tangi nikum shakti adikadi kindradu. That is, by practicing in this way, for the mind, the power to remain to remain standing in its birthplace. In other words, to be fixed in its birthplace. The birthplace of the mind is our own being. So that power to remain fixed in that will increase by practicing in this way. So that power is the power of sattvasana. The power Bhagavan refers to there is the power of sattvasana. It's only the love to be as we actually are that is the power by which we can be as we actually are. That's why Bhagavan often said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means that love just to be as we actually are. Because what we actually are, that is the true form of God. So the best devotion to God is just, as Bhagavan says in verses 8 and 9 of Upadesha. In verse 8 he says, rather than Anya Bhava, an Anya Bhava in which he is I is best among all. Anya Bhava means meditating on what is other. So in this context, it refers to meditating on God as a name or form, and therefore as something other than ourselves. Whereas Ananya means what is not other. So meditating on God as not other than oneself, with the understanding that he is I, that is the best among all. And then that's verse 8. And in verse 9 he says, Bhava Balatina, by the strength of meditation, that implies by the strength of that Ananya Bhava. Ananya Bhava means meditation on what is not other, means meditation on oneself. In other words, self-attentiveness. By the strength of that self-attentiveness, Bhavanatita Satbhava Iratale, being in that Satbhava, that state of being, which transcends bhavana. Bhavana there in that context means mental activity. Or meditation on anything other than ourselves is a mental activity, whereas meditation on our own being is a subsidence of the meditator and therefore of all mental activity. So being in that satbhava, that's our natural state of being, that is parabhakti tattva, that is the very nature of supreme devotion. So constantly trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves is the way to cultivate this satvasana. And to the extent to which the satvasana is strengthened, all other vasanas will be correspondingly weakened.
The next question is about today's verse, and it says, I've been reflecting on the strong desire for sex, which seems to have existed forever, through dreams after dreams or birth after birth. Even after coming to Aruṇācala and studying Bhagwan's teachings for years, I still can't seem to overcome this desire. Sometimes its intensity drives me to seek unhealthy ways to satisfy it. I find it disheartening that my friends who do not know about Aruṇācala or Bhagwan's teaching do manage these better than I do. Even after being close to Aruṇācala, I often feel worse, as I am seeking pleasure in unhealthy ways, while they seem to do well without all this. Unfortunately, I am unable to control myself. I often feel unworthy of Bhagwan because of who I am. How can I manage this desire without feeling guilty? As I feel the more you control it, the greater the force with which this vasana rises up.
You are saying what many of us feel. It's easy to look at others and think they manage all these things, but each one of us knows how strong these desires are and how difficult it is to overcome these desires. And it is for us who are in this position. I mean, what you're expressing here is exactly what Bhagavan is expressing in this verse. So this verse, I mean, we all feel like this, and this verse is, Bhagavan wrote this verse for us. And it's not overcoming this carnal desire is not an easy thing, because so long as we identify ourselves as this body, this is a biological desire, or a desire with biological roots. So long as we identify this body as I, this desire will be there to a greater or lesser extent. There may be times in our life when it doesn't trouble us so much. I lived in Tiruvannamalai for 20 years as a brahmachari. Throughout most of that time, I was troubled by this desire remarkably little. But suddenly, towards the end, it flared up and became very strong. So we can never know when we will, that is, we should never fool ourselves thinking that we've overcome this desire, because it may seem to be sometimes in abeyance, but suddenly it will raise its head. There's a Puranic story to illustrate this. Once the sage Narada, who's a great Vishnu Bhakta, he once the thought arose in his mind, oh, by the grace of Narayana, I've overcome all these desires. I've overcome this desire for sexual gratification. I've conquered Maya, he was thinking to himself. And of course, Narayana, who's in his heart, knows exactly what he's thinking. So Narayana, who's in the heart of all of us, is, as Krishna says, Aham Atma Gudakesha. He's the Atma in the heart of all of us. So he, of course, knows every thought that rises in the heart of his devotees. So when this subtle pride rose in the heart of Narada, it was, of course, known to Narayana, to Lord Vishnu. So he wanted to teach him a lesson. So he sent him on a mission. He said, "I want, please go to such and such place and do some task." He gave him some task. Just this is just a pretext. And Narada, being a great sage, a great siddha, he doesn't travel like us by foot or by horseback or anything. He flies through the air, and so by his powers, he was flying through the air on this mission on which he was sent by Narayana. And on the way, he passed over a very beautiful kingdom. It was a lush, very lush country and full of beautiful forests and gardens, and it looked so beautiful. So he thought, let me go and have a look at this kingdom. I've never seen such a beautiful place. So he came down and he came to this kingdom, and he went to the capital city of that kingdom, where he found all the people were living very happy, contented lives. And when he inquired, he was told that they had a very good king and that they lived a very peaceful life. Everything seemed to be almost like heaven. He thought, this is a very, very nice place. I never expected to find such a kingdom on earth. So he went to meet the king. And when he went to meet the king had a beautiful daughter. And when he saw that daughter, he fell in love with her. And the king, seeing this great sage coming, he was very welcome to him. And when he understood that this sage had a desire to marry his daughter, he welcomed him and said, "Yes, please, I offer my daughter's hand to you in marriage." And so Narada got married, and he was living a very happy married life, and he had children, and he had very good children, and everything was going perfectly. But he completely forgot the mission that on which he was sent by Narayana. And then at a certain point, I can't remember the exact details, but he suddenly woke up to the fact, oh, Narayana had sent me on a mission, and I completely forgot about it. And then Lord Vishnu appeared to him and said, "You thought that you had overcome this carnal desire. Nobody can overcome this carnal desire so long as you take the body to be I." So there may be times when we seem to be not so much troubled by these sorts of thoughts. There are other times when these vasanas are somehow, by Bhagavan's grace, they're churned and brought up to the surface of the mind and becomes a struggle for us. But notice that whatever rises to the surface of the mind is rising by Bhagavan's grace in order for us to overcome it. It may sometimes seem far from overcoming it, it's overcoming me. That's why this prayer is so important, because Bhagavan knows that we will fail time and time again. Just like when we're trying to attend to ourselves, moment to moment we are failing, and we try, but we have to continue trying. So we shouldn't feel guilty. We shouldn't feel bad about ourselves. We should just continue trying to practice self-attentiveness as much as possible. Because as I said earlier, however strong this desire may be, we're not all the time, that is throughout the waking and dream state, thinking of these things. We're thinking of so many other things also. So let us try, at the times when we're not troubled by this desire, let's try to be self-attentive as much as possible. And if this desire, in spite of our self-attentiveness, if this desire rises in our heart and we're not able to overcome it, then this verse is the perfect prayer given to us by Bhagavan. That is, Bhagavan wouldn't have written this verse if he didn't know the trouble that we all have with this problem. That's why he's written this verse. So he understands the problems we all face. That is, this verse, any true spiritual aspirant will have faced this problem of, at one time or other, they will have faced this problem of seemingly overwhelmingly strong carnal desire. This verse is the perfect prayer for that. So when Bhagavan has given this prayer to us, this also indirectly is telling us, don't feel guilty about this. But this desire is to be overcome. So if you're overwhelmed by this, then pray for the strength, to the love to attend to ourselves. We can't overcome the desire by fighting the desire. If we try to fight the desire, our attention is on that desire and it grows more and more and more. So we can overcome desires only by diverting our mind away towards something else. And what is the best thing to do? Divert our mind towards? Towards our own being. But when this desire is so strong, but we seem to have no love at all, even to try to attend to our being, then let us pray like this. And that will rekindle in us the love to attend to our own being. Because attending to our own being is what Bhagavan refers to here as taking the refuge in the fortress of Aruṇācala's feet.
There's one more question on desire, and then we can move to the questions
Yeah.
in the email and come back to the ones here. The question is, doesn't the desire to overcome lust defeat the very purpose of our sadhana to just be? If we have a desire to overcome or enjoy anything, whether good or bad, that is relative, that adds to our inclinations as well.
That's not quite correct. That is, but that is desiring wanting anything other than ourselves is called a desire. Wanting to be as we are is called love. In order to be as we are, we need to overcome all desires to experience anything other than ourselves. So that desire to overcome the desire is another name for that love to be as we actually are, because we can overcome all desires only by being as we actually are. So whether we call it desire or love, even Bhagavan uses the word, for example, there's a verse in Aksharamlai, Nesamilena ase kartine mosanchaya Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala, in me who was devoid of love, you showed me love for you. You showed me desire. He used the word asa. Asa means desire. Unase means your desire for you. You showed me desire for you. In other words, you gave me a taste of this desire for you. The desire for Aruṇācala is desire for our own being. So sometimes we can refer to this love to be as we actually are as a desire. But the words don't matter. What's important is we all desire. Desire is, love is our very nature. So whether we're directing our love towards other things, I want this, I want that, or whether we're directing our love back towards ourselves, just to subside and be as we actually are. So we can overcome all other desires only by the desire to be desireless. And the desire to be desireless is the desire to be as we actually are. Because only the state in which we do not rise as ego is the state of desirelessness. Because so long as we rise as ego, desire is inevitable. Desire is it's ego, that is, desire is not ego, but it's the very nature of ego to have desire. So since we've risen as ego, rather than desiring anything else, let's desire to subside, to be as we actually are. And that desire to be as we actually are is the desire to overcome all other desires. So it is not counterproductive, it is absolutely necessary. So I was beginning to explain that verse of Aksharamlai. Nesamilena ase kartine mosanchaya Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala, in me who was devoid of love, you showed me desire for you. Mosanchaya Daral. Now do not cheat me, do not disappoint me.
Thanks so much, Michael. Can I
Yeah.
just ask a quick follow-up question,
Yes,
please?
yes,
So if our real nature itself is ananda,
yes,
and we know that everything that exists is ananda as well,
yes.
everything that exists not different from me, then
so long as we see,
then why?
wait a second, can I just clarify one thing here? So long
Yeah,
as we see everything, we are seeing otherness. The real
right.
nature of everything is Satchidananda. But so
Mm-hmm.
long as we rise as ego, we see that one Satchidananda as many things. So long as we experience it as many things, we are not experiencing it as it is. That's why when we
Right,
rise as ego, we experience that one Ananda as a mixture of pain and pleasure, happiness and misery.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Just like we experience the one Sat as existence and non-existence, life and death. We experience the one Chit as awareness, non-awareness, knowledge, ignorance. But the actual underlying reality of everything is Satchidananda, which is one and indivisible. But so long as we rise and see otherness, we are not experiencing that Satchidananda as it is.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Does that answer your question, or?
It does. It
I
does.
interrupted you before you asked the question. Sorry.
No. That's absolutely fine. I think you more or less answered my question. I'm still wondering, because if our real nature is Ananda, you're right. I mean, we are actually Satchidananda, but to see everything, as ourselves, as Ananda, I don't see, why we should really try to overcome. If there is anything, a thing of beauty, but there is no movement towards it, it is just myself, it is Ananda. So I don't see why we should be trying to overcome desire of any sort, whether it's good or bad. I know it is more or less love that you mentioned to be ourselves,
Yes.
but trying to fight anything, basically, is just another inclination. And I did understand from your previous answer that,
Mm.
um,
The thing is, so everything doesn't exist. Everything seems to exist only when we rise as ego. In verse 26 of Ulladu, Bhagavan says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Everything, ahande yāvamam, ego itself is everything. That is what we see as all this. This is nothing but an expansion of ego. Whenever we rise as ego, we simultaneously project a world. So that this world we see is nothing but ego. The reality of ego is Satchidananda. But so long as we rise as ego, we do not experience Satchidananda as it is. Because Satchidananda is one and indivisible, immutable, never changing. We are experiencing it now as many constantly changing phenomena. That's why, so long as we experience anything other than ourselves, that is a clear sign that we have risen as ego. So long as we experience any multiplicity, so long as we experience anything that is changing, that is appearing or disappearing, all this is only because we have risen as ego. And our rising as ego is the fundamental problem. It's because we've risen as ego, but we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Because ego is the false awareness, I am this body. So if we want to experience Satchidananda as it is, we need to cease rising as ego. And in order to cease rising as ego, we need to cease being aware of everything, which is just a projection of ego. It's very, very important to understand this.
Right. I think that's a lot more clearer. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
I move on to the questions from the emails.
Yes.
The first one is, according to Ramana Maharshi's teachings, if I have made a series of decisions and actions with good intentions in my life, but they have resulted in bad outcomes, is this a result of my destiny, that is my karma, or my free will, that is ego?
Whatever we are given to experience is prarabdha. Prarabdha means that portion of the fruit of actions done, not in this lifetime, but in previous lifetimes, but we have been allotted for us by Bhagavan for us to experience in this lifetime. So whatever we experience in this lifetime is not caused by anything that happened in this lifetime. It is what has been preordained. It's been allotted to us already by Bhagavan. It may seem sometimes, oh, I did this, therefore it had this result. But that is because of our limited view. Whatever we experience now is not the fruit of what we've done in this lifetime. It's the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. And of course, we've done so many actions by mind, speech, and body in the past. So there's a huge store of the fruits of past actions that we haven't yet experienced. That store is called sanchita. And from that sanchita, Bhagavan selects he selects certain fruit for us to experience in this lifetime. And the fruit that have been selected for us to experience in this lifetime, this is what is called prarabdha, which means fate or destiny. So whatever we experience in this lifetime is the fruit of actions that we've done in the past, but not random selection of fruit, but fruit have been selected by Bhagavan for our spiritual advancement. So Bhagavan sometimes said, whether you call it destiny, whether you call it prarabdha or call it God's will, it's the same thing, because the prarabdha is allotted by God for our own benefit. So we shouldn't be thinking, oh, because I made a wrong decision, so I'm suffering like this. If what we experience, if we're suffering in a certain way, and our suffering seems to be caused by a wrong decision we made, that decision we made would have been a decision that we made in accordance with our destiny. Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother, Avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirantu artavipan. Avarava prarabdha prakaram means in accordance with the prarabdha of each one. Adakanavan means he who is for that. That is referring to God or Guru. Angangirantu means being there, implying being in each place, which implies being in the heart of each one of us. Artavipan literally means will cause to dance. In other words, in order for us to experience our prarabdha, certain actions are necessary on our part. Whatever actions are necessary, actions of mind, speech, or body that are necessary in order for us prarabdha to unfold, God will make us do those actions. Those actions we do are not prarabdha. Prarabdha is only the fruit of action. So fruit of action means it's what we are given to experience. But in order for us to experience it, certain actions of mind, speech, and body may be necessary. So that is, there's a term in Sanskrit, buddhi karma anusarini. That means the intellect going after the karma, literally is what it means. That implies we make decisions in accordance with the prarabdha. There's a similar term in Tamil, vidimati sallam. That means the fate driving the intellect. So our decisions are sometimes driven by fate, but our decisions are not the fate. The fate is what we are given to experience. But in order for us to experience it, certain decisions we are driven to make certain decisions. And who makes us make those decisions? Adakarnavan, he who is for that. In other words, God or Guru, Bhagavan, is making us make those decisions in order for us to experience what is already allotted. So we cannot but make those. They may seem to us, from our limited point of view, oh, that was a wrong decision. Because I made that wrong decision, now I'm suffering like this. If what we are now experiencing seems to have been brought about by that decision, it's because that means that decision was a decision we were made to make in order for us to experience what was already preordained. But this doesn't mean that all our decisions, all our actions are actions we're made to do by God. That would be absurd, because if all our actions were actions we were made to do by God, then we wouldn't be the doer. He would be the doer. He would be the one who has to experience the fruit. As Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Ulladu, if we are the doer of actions, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. That doesn't mean the actions we do in this lifetime we're going to experience in this lifetime. It doesn't work like that. The actions we've done in previous lifetimes are the fruit we are experiencing in this lifetime is actions we did in previous lifetimes. Because what we are destined to experience in this lifetime cannot be changed in any way by any amount of action we do. So as Bhagavan says in the second and third sentences of the note he wrote for his mother, Endrum naduvadu, envichikanum naduvadu. What is not to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. So that means we have the freedom to want to avoid certain things. We have the freedom to try to avoid certain things. But if it's destined to happen, we cannot avoid it. It's going to be experienced by us. Likewise, nadabadu en tadeseyenum niladu. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. So we can want to avoid it. We can try to avoid it, but we cannot avoid it. So whatever we experience in this lifetime, whatever we are given to experience in this lifetime, is our prarabdha. It's already predetermined. There's nothing we can do to either to avoid what is to happen or to experience what is not to happen. It's already been predetermined by Bhagavan for our own good. And then he says in the next sentence, Iduvei tinnam, this is certain. Ahalin monamai irake nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. What does he mean by being silent? Being silent means being without rising as ego. So let anything happen. Whatever happens in this life, it's all his will. So let seemingly good things or seemingly bad things happen. Nothing can happen except by his will. So let it happen. Our aim should be to turn within and thereby subside back into our own being, which is the state of silence, eternal, immutable silence. That is what he means by monomayirake, just being as we actually are, without rising as ego. So let's not worry about, we all experience a mixture of pleasant and unpleasant things in this life. This bodily existence is not all pleasant. We all undergo unpleasant experiences. This is the nature of embodied existence. This is the nature of samsara. So let's not worry about these things. Let us just have love to attend to our own being and thereby surrender ourselves to Bhagavan. Regarding free will, Bhagavan never actually spoke about free will, because the trouble with the term free will is there are two things there. There's will. We all have a will. Our will is, in its seed form, is all the vasanas. And those vasanas are what sprout in the form of likes, dislikes, desires, attachments. So that whole bundle of vasanas and the resulting likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on, that is called our will. That is what in Sanskrit is referred to as chittam. Chittam is the totality of all our vasanas. And it's also called Anandamaya Kosha, or the Karana Sarira, the causal body. That is our will. Do we have freedom of will, is the question. Yes, Bhagavan says we have what he referred to as Ichya Swatantra. Ichya Swatantra means two things. Firstly, whatever vasanas we have, nobody compels us to have these vasanas. These vasanas are vasanas we, of our own misusing our freedom, we have cultivated these vasanas. And we have we have freedom of will also in a deeper sense, that the vasanas are just inclinations. Inclinations means we are not bound by our inclinations. We all have so many inclinations, but often we have contrary inclinations. For example, we may be eating a very tasty meal and we know we've had enough, and someone offers us something else which also looks very tasty. So we may feel inclined, oh, I'd like to eat that. But at the same time, we know if I eat that, I'm just going to make myself sick. I've already eaten too much already. So we have two opposite inclinations. One is to eat it, one is not to eat it. So throughout moment to moment in our life, so many vasanas are rising in our mind. We have the freedom to be swayed by this vasana or that vasana. That is where the real freedom lies. We are constantly misusing that freedom. When we allow ourselves to be swayed by a vasana, the vasana leads to actions of mind, and the actions of mind often lead to actions of speech and of body. So the seeds that give rise to all actions are the vasanas. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 2 of Upadesha Undiyā, Vinayim vilevutu vittai, vile kadu vitidam undipara, vidu tarilere undipara. That is, the fruit of action perishing. What does he mean by the fruit of action perishing? That is, when we experience, as we're experiencing destiny, we're experiencing the fruit of our past actions. Once we experience the fruit of any action, that fruit is finished. That just like you can't eat the same mango twice. If you've eaten the mango, it's finished. You can't eat it again. We can't. Once we experience the fruit of any action, that is finished. So the nature of as he says in the Sanskrit version of that verse, palamasaswatam, the fruit of the action is impermanent, because as soon as you experience it, it's finished. But though it's finished, as he says in Tamil, it remains as a seed. The seed is a vittu, that seed is the vasana. So though we experience the fruit of the actions we've done in the past, the vasanas that prompted us to do those actions still remain. And those seeds, those vasanas, are what makes us fall in the great ocean of action. In the Sanskrit version, he says, kriti mahodado patana karanam, the cause for falling in the great ocean of action. but he doesn't specify there in the Sanskrit what the cause is. That cause is, he makes clear in Tamil, is vittu. Vittu means the seed, that is the vasana. And in the Malayalam version of that verse, he says vasanakara vittu. So it's the seeds in the form of vasanas. So the vasanas are what cause us to do agamya. Agamya are the actions that give rise to that yield fruit. That get stored in sanchitam, but we may later be given to experience as prarabdha. So when we misuse our freedom of will, that is, freedom of will is closely associated with what Bhagavan called Ichcha Swatantra. The freedom of will is closely associated with Kriya Swatantra, the freedom of action. That is, we are free to act according to our will. So if we have a certain inclination and we allow ourselves to be swayed by that inclination, that gives rise to an action. So Bhagavan often spoke about Ichcha Kriya Swatantra, freedom of will and action, because they go together. We couldn't have freedom of action if we didn't have freedom of will. So freedom of will is the base. That when we act in accordance with what we have freely chosen to do, that is the agamya. And that agamya is what gives rise to the fruit. I mean, the agamya bears fruit. The fruit is what gets stored in sanchita, and the sanchita is what is experienced as the destiny. So our freedom of will is very important. We need to use our freedom of will wisely. If we misuse our freedom of will, we are just creating more and more fruit. The wise way to use our freedom of will is not to allow ourselves to be swayed by any Vishaya Vasana, but to allow ourselves to be swayed only by Sat Vasana. In other words, not to rise to do anything by mind, speech, or body, but to turn back within and subside back into our own being. I hope that's a clear answer to that question.
There are several questions, Michael, so get on with this.
Yeah.
The next one on the email is, in one of his videos, Michael says that it is not possible to see the world as Brahman. However, I have a friend who has been graced by an enlightened master, and he saw the Prem Mandir and he saw
it's not very well. I think what he's saying is the Prem Mandir, which is made of marble stone.
Yes, made of marble stone, where I live, as totally a structure made of consciousness with form. Swami Vivekananda's famous experience is also well documented. How grace of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans made him see the chairs, the ground, etc., as totally made of consciousness with form. What can we infer from this? That everything is indeed Brahman? At the highest level of consciousness, no form is seen. It's only the self, or Brahman, without form that is experienced. At a lower level, Brahman with form, that is, the world as Brahman, is experienced. At a further lower level, it is matter with form, that is, the world as matter is experienced. All different interpretations of Vedanta stem from different levels of consciousness. Correct interpretation of Bhagavan's words cannot be done unless one has attained experience that Brahman alone exists. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Firstly, in the original email, he actually gave a reference to the video where I had said what he says I said. He says that I said it's not possible to see the world as Brahman. That wasn't exactly what I said. What I was explaining, I started in that portion explaining what Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Ulladu. And I went on to, while explaining that, I then talked about paragraphs 3 and 4 of Nana. in verse 13 of Ulladu, Bhagavan says, Nānavam jnanam, jnanamam tane me. Oneself who is jnana alone is real. Jnana in this context means awareness. In this sentence, it means pure awareness. So oneself who is pure awareness alone is real. Then in the next sentence, he says, Nānavam jnanam ajnanamam. That means awareness that is manifold or various is ignorance. What that implies is that what actually exists is only the one single awareness, which is ourself. Nothing else exists. When we experience that one awareness as all this multiplicity, that is what Bhagavan refers to there as Nānavam jnanam. In an earlier version of that verse, he actually he'd written the verse in a slightly different form, and what he wrote was Nāna Vaikānkindra jnanam. In the first sentence, he wrote jnanam ṇeṅṭṛunē, that is, awareness alone is real. Nāna Vaikānkindra jnanam is ajnana. The rest of the verse went on more or less the same. So what he means, Nāna Vaikānkindra jnana, means the awareness that sees as many. What actually exists is only one thing, which is pure awareness, which is Brahman. But the awareness that sees that one thing as many, that is ignorance. What is the awareness that sees the one as many? That is ego. So that is what I was explaining. And then I went on to explain, but I didn't say it is not possible to see the world as Brahman. What I was explaining was seeing the world as Brahman is not what people imagine it to be. But you see all the tables and chairs and houses and temples and marble and all these things, and you see them as Brahman. If you see all these things, you are not seeing them as Brahman, because Brahman is nameless and formless. So long as we see forms, we are not seeing Brahman as it is. And so I explained what Bhagavan said in the third paragraph of Nāna. In the third paragraph of Nāna, Bhagavan says, if the mind, which is the cause for all awareness and all action, there, in that context, awareness means awareness of things other than oneself. So if the mind that is the cause for all knowledge or awareness and action subsides, Jagat Drishti will cease. Just as the knowledge of the rope, which is the adhisthana, the underlying reality, will not arise until the false perception of the snake goes. That is, so long as you see the rope as a snake, you don't see it as a rope. Only when you cease seeing it as a snake can you see it as it actually is, as a rope. So as soon as if you look at a snake carefully enough, you'll see it is just a rope. As soon as you see it's a rope, you no longer see it as a snake. So seeing the world as Brahman is like saying seeing the snake as a rope. When you see the snake as a rope, it never was a snake. It was always only a rope. But that means seeing the snake as it actually is, it means seeing it as a rope. Then you no longer see it as a snake. So Bhagavan said, just like that, until the Jagat Drishti, the perception of the world ceases, it is not possible to see the underlying reality, because we are seeing the underlying reality as the world. So we're not seeing the underlying reality as it is. So one's swarupa, he used the words swarupa darshanam. Swarupa darshanam means seeing oneself. In other words, knowing ourselves as we actually are. What swarupa is the adhisthana. We cannot know the adhisthana so long as we see the world, because what we see as the world is nothing but that adhisthana. So I explained that, and then I went on to explain the next paragraph, in which Bhagavan explains the same idea in more detail, saying the whole world is nothing but a projection of the mind. It consists of nothing but thought, and is projected by the mind. Just like the spider spins out the thread from within itself and again draws it back, so the mind projects the world and draws it back within. In the Upanishads, it is said, but Brahman projects the world and withdraws it back into itself, just like the spider projects the web and draws it back into itself. So is Bhagavan contradicting the Upanishads? No, he's clarifying what is said in the Upanishads, because in the Upanishads, Brahman as Brahman does not project the world. Only when Brahman seems to be ego or mind does it project the world. And so in that fourth paragraph, Bhagavan also clearly says, therefore, so long as we see the world, we do not see Swarupa. And when we see Swarupa, we do not see the world. That is just like saying, so long as you see the snake, you don't see the rope. And when you see the rope, you don't see the snake. So it was in that sense that I was saying, I didn't say it's not possible to see the world as Brahman. What I was saying is, seeing the world as Brahman is not what people imagine. People imagine that you see the world and you see it all as Brahman. That that's like saying you see the snake and you see it as a rope. If you see it as a rope, you don't see it as a snake. So, but Brahman is one and indivisible. The world is manifold. So long as you see it as manifold, that is ignorance. And what sees the world as many is only ego. This person also writes, but everything indeed is Brahman. Yes, everything indeed is Brahman, but Bhagavan has refined the explanation of this. In verse 26 of Ulladu, he says, Ahandeye yavamam. Ego itself is everything. So again, is he contradicting the Upanishads that say everything is Brahman? No, he's not. Everything is only ego. And if ego turns its attention away from everything back towards itself to see who am I, it will subside and dissolve back into its source by seeing itself as Brahman. When ego sees itself as Brahman, then Brahman alone remains, nothing else. Because when ego, by seeing ourselves as Brahman, we as ego cease to exist. And everything else exists only in the view of ego. So he says here about a friend of his who had been graced by an enlightened master and saw the Prem Mandir, which is a temple built of marble. It's a temple, it's a modern temple in Vrindavan. His friends saw that as totally a structure made of consciousness with form. What does consciousness with form mean? Consciousness is formless. Consciousness with form is what is called ego. That is, ego is nothing but pure awareness. It's nothing but the fundamental awareness I am, but mixed and conflated with the form of a body, as I am this body. So ego is called Chit Jada Granti. That is, all forms are Jada. Jada means they're not aware. But forms are all objects of awareness. So the ego is a mixture of Chit, the pure awareness, and these forms which are Jada. So the form that ego mistakes itself to be is the form of a body. So when we rise as ego, we, the awareness, the consciousness, identify ourselves as I am this body. That is consciousness with form. What Bhagavan says about that in verse 4 of Ulladu is, Uruvam Tanayin Uluhu Paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. What does he mean by saying if oneself is a form? The implication is, if we rise as ego and thereby identify ourselves as a form, we will see the world and God as forms. We cannot know God as formless so long as we mistake ourselves to be a form. Because whatever conception we may have of God, that conception is just a mental image, a mental impression, which is a form. So we cannot know God as formless without knowing ourselves as formless. That's the implication of that first sentence. And then in the second sentence, he is a rhetorical question. He says, if oneself is not a form, who can see their forms? How? Two questions he asked. So if we are not a form, who is there to see the forms of God, the world and God? And how to see the forms of world and God? That is, the world and God seem to be forms only so long as we mistake ourselves to be a form. And then he says, Kannalal Kakshiondo. That is a sentence which sometimes people translate it literally as kan means eye. Eye means not the pronoun now, eye, but the organ of sight. So kannalal, sometimes people translate it as without the eye, can there be a sight? But Bhagavan explained what he meant by that is, can what is seen be otherwise than the seer? In other words, the nature of what is seen is going to be the same as the nature of what sees it. So if we see ourselves as a form, we will only see forms. Whereas if we see ourselves, if we experience ourselves as the formless pure awareness, we will experience only formless pure awareness. So he concludes that verse by saying, Antamila kan, he ends by saying. Antamila kan means a formless eye. Kan adutam antamila kan. Oneself is the eye, the formless eye. Sorry, the limitless. Antamila means limitless. The limitless, all forms are limited. What is limitless, what is infinite, is formless. So what we actually are is the formless awareness. So long as we see forms, it's because we have wrongly identified ourselves as the form of a body. So if we say that we see a temple made of marble stone, if we say we see it as consciousness with form, well, obviously consciousness itself doesn't have form. Consciousness seems to be a form only when we rise as ego, the consciousness rises ego and take ourselves to be the form of a body. And then he refers to Swami Vivekananda's experience. He says Vivekananda's famous experience is well documented, how the grace of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa made him see the chairs, ground, etc. as totally made of consciousness with form. No, that is not what happened. When Ramakrishna touched Vivekananda, he saw all the forms disappearing, just the vast expanse of consciousness. And he said, no, I've got a mother, I've got a father, I've got family, I've got responsibilities. Then Ramakrishna let him come back to his normal state and said, a time will come. That is, it's not the time for him to have that experience yet. He gave him a taste of that experience. But that he didn't experience the chairs on the ground as consciousness with form. He experienced only consciousness. That is what he had previously seen as the forms of the table, the ground, etc. He suddenly experienced as an infinite, undivided expanse of consciousness. And he got fear. Just like Arjuna, when Krishna showed his Vishwarupa Darshanam, how Arjuna got fear, Ramakrishna didn't give Vivekananda the Vishwarupa Darshanam, he gave him the Swarupa Darshanam, at least a taste of that Swarupa Darshanam. And that taste, he wasn't ready for it yet. So he said, I got mother, I got father, and he came back. So what Vivekananda experienced was not consciousness with form, but just plain consciousness. That's what created the fear. And Ramakrishna knew Vivekananda had a mission. So it wasn't time for him to have that experience yet. So long as we see form, we are not seeing Brahman as it is. Though it is said, Brahman, we talk about nirguna Brahman and saguna Brahman. Does that mean there are two Brahmans? Well, one is nirguna, one is saguna? No, Brahman is always one. The real nature of Brahman is nirguna. But so long as we rise as ego, take ourselves to be a form, we see Brahman as God, which is saguna Brahman. It's Brahman with form, with qualities, but that is not. That is Brahman, but not Brahman as it actually is. It's Brahman as it seems to be from the perspective of ego. So he then says, at the highest level of consciousness, no form is seen. Only the self or Brahman without form is experienced. Yes, that's not the highest level of consciousness. That is pure consciousness. That's the only real state there is. At a little lower level, Brahman with form, i.e. worlds as Brahman is experienced. So long as we experience the world as world, we do not experience it as Brahman. When we experience it as Brahman, we experience only Brahman, no world. So this middle level that he's referring to is not actually, it's what Bhagavan refers to in verse 20 of Ulladu as Manomayamam Kakshi, a mental vision. That is, Bhagavan says, without seeing oneself seeing God is seeing only a Manomayamam Kakshi, a mental, Kakshi means what is seen. Manomaya means which is composed of mind. So seeing God as something other than ourselves, seeing God in name and form is seeing only a Manomayamam Kakshi. So what he's referring to here is Manomayamam Kakshi. You may imagine that you're seeing the world as Brahman, but you're not actually seeing it as Brahman, because if you see it as Brahman, you don't see the world at all. You see only Brahman. And then he says, all different interpretations of Vedanta stem from different levels of consciousness. Yes, but which is the real consciousness? Real consciousness, as Bhagavan says, jnanamam tane me, oneself who is awareness alone is real. So that pure awareness alone is the real awareness. Seeing as many, being aware of many things, is ignorance, according to Bhagavan. And then he says, correct interpretation of Bhagavan's words cannot be done unless one has attained experience of Brahman, experience that Brahman alone exists. Yes, we can truly know what Bhagavan's teachings are pointing at, what Bhagavan's words are pointing at, only when we experience, as he says in the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yatatamai Ulladu Atma-swarupamandre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. That Atma-swarupa and Brahman is another name for, Brahman is another name for Atma-swarupa, let's say. Atma-swarupa means what we actually are, the real nature of ourself, or ourself as we actually are. So, Bhagavan's words are, that is, many of Bhagavan's words are so, if we cannot understand Bhagavan's words without experiencing Brahman alone exists, then Bhagavan's words will be useless. Because if we cannot understand them before we experience Brahman, that Brahman alone exists, and when we experience Brahman alone exists, Bhagavan's words become superfluous. No, Bhagavan's words are intended to point us towards that experience. So we can understand Bhagavan's words, maybe not perfectly, but we can understand to a considerable extent. But we need to understand not just the words of Bhagavan, but why Bhagavan is pointing out what he's pointing out. All Bhagavan's words ultimately are pointing at the need for us to turn our attention within, to stop seeing all this multiplicity. As he says in verse 16 of Upadeshundiya, Veli videngale vitu, um, uh, leaving all external phenomena, that is, leaving all names and forms. Uh, um, Manam tan oliuru ordale undipara unme unichiam undipara. The mind knowing its own form of light. Its form of light means their light means the light of awareness. So the mind seeing itself as awareness alone is unmeyunichi, is real awareness. So seeing Vishayas, seeing name and form is not real awareness. In the Sanskrit version of that verse, Bhagavan says, Drisya Varitam, withdrawn from all this drisya, everything that is seen. In other words, withdrawn from all phenomena. Chittam Atmanaha Chitva, Chitva Darshanam, the mind seeing its own chitva, its own nature of as awareness. Atmanaha there means its own. So the mind seeing its own nature of awareness, tattva darshanam, that is seeing the reality. So if we see anything other than awareness, we are not seeing tattva. We are seeing names and forms. We're not seeing the reality. We are seeing something superimposed upon that reality. That is, names and forms are what conceal reality. And names and forms exist only in the view of ego, which is the Chitjadagranti, the awareness that is mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So it's only when we mistake ourselves to be a form that we see other forms. So long as we see forms, we do not see ourselves as we actually are, which means we do not see Brahman as it actually is. We see it as all these names and forms, which is not what it actually is.
Michael, can I ask you a very quick question here?
Yes.
What you say is, of course, as always, completely true, valid, and so incontestable. There was just this, in terms of the body itself and its senses, there was, I remember the story in which Bhagwan, I think there's somebody who broke some coconut water or something, broke a coconut, and this cold water went pouring down Bhagwan. And he said, this business, you see that the jnani, that there is no kind of body there, all is Brahman kind of thing. So, you can just break coconuts and do whatever you like. So I simply wanted to ask this question here, that a little bit of common sense and is that while it's absolutely true that that identification with the body, letting go of the ego, etc., all of this is necessary to see all is Brahman, that does not mean that at a relative conventional everyday level we can go about behaving as if everything is this one Brahman in this particular way, where So I just felt that this could be clarified, because otherwise it can lead to this confusion that, look, there is only this one Brahman. There are no forms. There is no senses. No taste, no cold, no heat. So that would be very confusing for people and lead to wrong behavior. So
like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, God exists in all, but for that reason, don't go and embrace a tiger.
Exactly.
At the Vivaharika level, all these names and forms, you have to act as if it's all true, because we who are acting are a self-form. So we can't pretend that we've risen above forms so long as we experience forms. Because we experience forms, as Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Ulunaptu, it's only when we mistake ourselves to be a form, but we experience all other forms. Bhagavan also used that to justify worship of name and form. So long as we experience ourselves as a form, we can have an idea, oh, God is formless, but even that idea God is formless is itself just an idea. And ideas are just mental forms. So we cannot experience God as formless so long as we mistake ourselves to be a form. So it is appropriate to worship God in name and form. But That worship of God in name and form is good. But better than that, because worship of God in name and form is what he calls Anyabhava in verse 8 of Upadesh Undiyā. Better than Anyabhava is the Ananyabhava, meditating on God as nothing other than oneself. That is an Aitinam Uttamam, best among all. That is the form. That is, if we want to approach formless worship, it's only by meditating on our own formless being. In other words, meditating on ourselves, but we can truly meditate, but we can even begin to meditate on the formless God. But actually meditating on the formless God is, as Bhagavan says in the first Mangalam verse of Ulladu, how to meditate on that Ullaporul, the Satvastu, the existing, the being substance, which is called the heart, and which exists beyond, since it exists beyond thought in the heart, how to meditate on it? Only to be in the heart as it is meditating. Ullate, ullapadi, ullade, ullal, he says. So it's only by we can, the true formless worship of God, the true formless anubhava of God, experience of God, is just being that, being as it is. That means being without rising as ego.
Oh, yes, Michael, but sort of what you mentioned, which is there across Advaita Vedanta and also in Bhagavan's teaching, this thing of the two truths, the conventional or the vyavharik and the paramarth. And there is a reason for that.
Of
And a
course,
very
yes.
good one, which, for those not familiar, it simply means sort of the ultimate and the conventional, relative, transactional, everyday, the two levels of reality, of perspective, what do we want to call it? Because this, and the reason for pointing it out is because yes, the Jnani sees everything as Brahman and so on. But as long as, from a conventional point of view, there is a body, whether it's the Jnanis, my own, and everybody else's, there are codes of conduct, there is perception, there are forms, and so on. There is a kind of ephemeral reality. It may not be truly substantial, but truly real in some sense, ultimately real, but it has a conventional reality and one has to respect it. Otherwise, you end up with all kinds of problems of misconduct and things like that.
Exactly, absolutely.
Okay.
That is, Bhagavan sees everything as Brahman. In other words, he sees only Brahman. He doesn't see everything. But we see Brahman, we see Bhagavan as a form. We see him as a person. And so we break a coconut and pour the cold coconut water over his head. That is not what that is. We are to worship, but that is the name and form of Bhagavan is to be revered. But we need to revere it in an appropriate way. That is what Bhagavan said when that person broke the coconut and poured it over his head. He said, this is not a vigraha. This is not you can do that in the temple. You can pour the coconut water over a vigraha in the temple. But so long as we, that is at that time, Bhagavan appeared in a human name and form. You need to treat the human name and form not as a vigraha. You need to treat it appropriately.
Yeah, I think because the body starts feeling cold if there is a human form there, and so that must be respected as long as the body is there, regardless of whether associated with a jnani or not.
I mean, for Bhagavan, it was a bit of a joke. He used to tell that story jokingly, but he was sitting there. I think it was when he was in Virupaksha, and it's cold at night because it's winter time. So he had come out and was sitting in the sunshine, warming himself up. And some person came and broke this coconut and poured it over his head, and suddenly a shock. But I mean, of course, Bhagavan is unaffected by all these things. But he then told this person, this is a body, this is a living body, not a vigraha.
Can go on to the next question. Could you please clarify verse 19 of Upadesh Tannipakal, which is,
Tanipakal.
how do you say that, sorry?
Tanipakal.
Tannipakal. Michael, could you please clarify verse 19 of Upadesha Tannipakal, which is as follows. What is experienced as Shanti, peace, in inward look itself is what is experienced as Shakti power by the outward look. For those who investigate and know, they are one. In what way is Shakti experienced by outward look? It is not clear. Thank you.
Okay. What Bhagavan means by that is, when we look within, we experience infinite peace. If we look really, I mean, I'm not just saying look superficially within. If we look deep within, what we experience is the infinite peace of pure being. That infinite peace of pure being is what is manifest outwardly as the power that has created this whole universe. Sadhu Om explained that in a very nice way. He said, which is a greater power? The power of a dam that holds back millions of gallons of water and holds it all in a calm, peaceful state? Or if there's a weakness in that dam, it will crack and the water will begin to gush out and come out with great force. Which is more powerful? The dam that is cracked and releases that water, or the dam that remains firm without cracking, without releasing the water? Obviously, the dam that remains firm is the greater power. And because of that firmness, there's perfect calmness, the water in the reservoir is perfectly calm. But as soon as there's a weakness in the dam and it cracks, all this power comes out. There's great force which can, if a dam breaks, it can destroy so many things with the great power of water. So there's so much power in that water in the dam, but it's all being held in a calm state by the firmness of the dam. So likewise, if we remain firmly fixed in our own being, that is a state of perfect peace. All the power of this that creates this whole universe is nothing but a weakness in that self-abidance. When we lose our hold on that being as we actually are, we rise as ego and everything is created. So all this great power we see in the universe, what is that power that has created all this wonderful phenomena and is driving machines and there's so many power is manifest in so many ways in this universe. All this power is nothing but a weakness in that in the infinite power of self-abidance.
Got it.
So, is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Michael, there are quite a lot of questions about 8 or 9. So the next one is, can prarabdha karma create fatalism and reincarnation create complacency? As many say, they have countless lives to attain moksha. Can these concepts be counterproductive?
If we misinterpret anything, it can be counterproductive. If we understand correctly, if that is, yes, that is the law of karma, as explained by Bhagavan, is actually very simple. But obviously it's something subtle. It's very, very easy to misinterpret it. People misinterpret the law of karma in so many ways. For example, some people are very stingy, very mean. So even if they see a person suffering, they're not willing to try to alleviate their suffering because they think, oh, it's their karma, so let them suffer. That's just they use the law of karma as an excuse for being stingy, for being miserly. So of course we can misinterpret it in any way we like. Oh, sooner or later I'll get moksha, so why should I bother now? The reason we bother now is because so long as we remain in samsara, we suffer. Samsara is a state of whatever little joys we experience in samsara are accompanied by so many sufferings. See how people rejoice when a child is born. Everyone rejoices, everyone is very happy. But one thing that is certain, the only thing that is certain about that child's life is one day they're going to die. So, but people don't think of that. They rejoice about the birth. And when it comes to the end of a life and that person dies, oh, everyone weeps and everything. But this is, if there is birth, there is going to be death. And if there's death, there's going to be birth. The two are inseparable. So the nature of samsara, if we are happy to, if we think, if we lack the viveka to understand that we are, by remaining in samsara, we are just courting trouble, then remain in samsara as long as you like. Take any number of births, suffer any amount of sufferings. Sooner or later, we by the grace of Bhagavan, we slowly get the wisdom to understand this is a fool's business. Being born and dying is for fools. And we get the wisdom to understand we need to aspire for something beyond this. And then we begin to make effort. But if we're not serious about this, if we still think samsara is, oh, it's fine, I'm having a good time, I'm enjoying my life. If forgetting all the troubles that this life is bringing us day by day, and it's finally going to end in death, forgetting all that, we say, oh, no, I like this samsara. If we like samsara, okay, happy, continue. But and then we can, if we like this samsara, we can use any excuse. Yes, why should I struggle for mukti? Because anyway, I'm going to get mukti one day, so why should I bother about trying for it? So you can misinterpret anything. They say the devil quotes the Bible. So people use all sorts of philosophy to justify all manner of sins. So, but this is why in the classical Advaita, they talk about the qualifications. The first qualification is nitya and nitya vastu viveka, distinguishing the eternal from the ephemeral. And that leads to the second one, which is vairagya. Once we understand that all all phenomena, not only all phenomena, the ego that experiences all phenomena, these are all ephemeral. They're all anitya. Only when we understand that clearly, do we begin to develop vairagya. We begin to free ourselves from the desire for all these things. And then there are the other 6 qualifications, and then finally, mumukshutva, the intense desire, intense yearning for liberation. So the viveka is very, very important. If we lack viveka, we will surely misinterpret the law of karma. We misinterpret everything. Scriptures are just words. They can be interpreted or misinterpreted in so many different ways. So it's according to as Bhagavan said to Lakshman Sharma, according to the purity of yantakarana, the same teaching reflects in different ways. So it's according to the purity of our mind, but we understand these things. If we lack purity, even Bhagavan's words will misinterpret. Though Bhagavan has put it as clearly as it can be put in words, we can still easily misinterpret it. If we don't have, if we haven't understood that we're all lacking, we all have insufficient vairagya, insufficient bhakti. But at least if we aspire for bhakti and vairagya, then only we can begin to understand what Bhagavan is talking about.
The next question, if the realization of the self is not an attainment, but simply being, then what role does the seeker have? An emptiness is often witnessed without any thoughts, but that too is just a perception and it is limited to the mind.
What role does the seeker have? The seeker is ego. The role of ego is to surrender itself. And how does ego surrender itself? By turning its attention within. When it turns its attention within, it thereby subsides and dissolves back into its source. And then it remains as it actually is, which is the state of liberation, which is eternal. So what is called the attainment of liberation is not gaining anything, it's losing everything. By losing the root of everything, which is ego. So the role of ego is to lose itself, and it loses itself by turning its attention back within.
The next question is, I find I'm not remembering often enough to turn within, but on the other hand, I find it extremely easy to constantly think of Bhagwan. Is this anya bhavana, and is it therefore counterproductive? Or is it a stepping stone to turning within? In any case, I'm still doubtful if I'm doing it correctly. Thank you.
It's a stepping stone. That is the true remembrance of Bhagavan. Bhagavan is not the name and form. Though he appeared outwardly in a name and form to tell us to turn within, his true form, his swarupa, is Atma-swarupa. So he's nothing but our own reality. So the best way to meditate on Bhagavan is to meditate on ourself alone. But we all have insufficient love to attend to ourselves alone. That's why we spend so much time attending to other things. So rather than attending to anything else, better to attend to the name and form of Bhagavan, because by meditating on the name and form of Bhagavan, meditating on his teachings, meditating on his kindness, his love, his clarity, just looking at his eyes is enough to make us, to rekindle in us that longing to turn within, to lose ourselves completely in him. So meditating on his name and form is good, but we need to, we shouldn't stop with that. By meditating on his name and form, that'll give us the love to turn within. So let us try to turn within as much as possible. When we fail to turn within, let us even just looking at the eyes of Bhagavan can have a calming effect on the mind and can rekindle in our heart the longing to merge in him by turning back within.
The next question. I feel today that grace has become a promiscuous term, as all spiritual and religious paths claim it is by grace a seeker is brought to their door. How do we identify true grace instead of that which misleads?
Tattvamasi. That grace is nothing. Grace, Bhagavan often used to say, grace is not something up in heaven that's going to descend on you one day. Grace is what is always shining in our heart as eye. So if we are really seeking grace, we will turn within. Of course, like anything else, like all words, so many people have so many different understandings of what is grace. But ultimately, grace is the infinite love that we as we actually are have for ourselves as we actually are. So grace is that power that pulls our mind within. So the love to turn within, that is grace. So if anyone says, come to me, I will give you grace, that is their pulling us outwards rather than, Bhagavan says, if you want grace, find it, it's there, ever present there in your own heart. All you need to do is to look within. So Bhagavan doesn't say, come to me, I'll give you grace. He'll say, you yourself are grace. Find yourself and you'll find grace. But his grace is always working in a very subtle way deep in our own heart. So we should never doubt the power of true grace. But that true grace is what will draw us within. What draws us outwards is called Maya. Maya and grace are not two different things, but they're same power. The power is one. But when that power is when we utilize that power to go within, that is grace. When we misuse that power to go outwards, that is Maya.
The next question. Could Michael be so kind as to go into the witness or subject a bit more? Because the witness is still a subtle aspect of ego or mind. So witnessing in this sense is not a helpful practice, as it is still in the realm of illusion. Is it correct to state that self-attention is rather to witness the witness? I have the feeling that identifying as the witness as a practice is misleading in a way. Thank you so much.
The term witness, Bhagavan clarified that the term witness, sakshi, is used in two senses. If by witness we mean the knower, that is ego. If by witness but often Brahman is referred to as the witness. Sometimes Brahman is referred to as Sarva-sakshi, the witness of all, or Jiva-sakshi, the witness of the Jiva. There, Bhagavan says, Sakshi means sanadhi. Witness means presence. So Brahman is the Sakshi of everything in the sense that it's in the presence of Brahman that everything happens. Not that Brahman is aware, is watching everything that happens. And if a crime is committed, anyone who is present at the scene of the crime will be called as a witness to the court. But if a person said, "No, I was looking the other way, I didn't see anything," then they're disqualified. But it's the sense in which the word witness is used is in two senses. Sometimes the word witness refers to the knower. That is ego. Sometimes the word witness refers to the ultimate reality in the presence of which all happens. But everything happens in the presence of Brahman. It doesn't happen in the view of Brahman, because Brahman is pure being. And in the view of pure being, there is only pure being. There's no happening, no doing. So we need to understand from a context the sense in which the word sakshi is used. When sakshi is used in the sense of a knower, that doesn't mean this is a very gross misinterpretation, because in English, in Sanskrit, sakshi is a noun, but in English, witness is both a noun and a verb. So people think, in order to be the witness, I have to witness everything. If I'm witnessing everything, by witnessing, they mean just looking at everything. So long as we're looking at everything, that is the very nature of ego is always to be aware of things other than itself. So we are, by attending to other things, by witnessing our thoughts or witnessing things, we are just nourishing and sustaining ego. However, people sometimes say, no, you have to be a detached witness. Well, being aware of anything other than ourselves is a form of attachment, because it's everything other than ourselves is a projection. We are aware of it because we're attending to it. However, there is a sort of practice where you try to let everything happen, but you remain detached from it. That can have some value, but it's only of superficial value, because so long as things are happening, so long as we're aware of things that are happening, we're affected by them. So it's only to a very limited extent that we can be aware of things and remain detached from them. If we want to be really detached, we need to stop looking at anything other than ourselves. But in order to detach ourselves from everything else, we need to attach ourselves to ourselves. In other words, we need to hold firmly to ourselves. As Bhagavan says in one verse of Guru Vachaka Kubai, cling like an udumbu to yourself. Udumbu is a type of lizard. I think it's a monitor lizard or something, but it has suction pads on its hands and feet, so it can climb up a wall. And it holds fast to the wall so firmly, you can hold the body of the udumbu, and you cannot detach it. So you can actually lift yourself up holding the body of. So Bhagavan uses that as an analogy. We need to cling to our own being so firmly in order to detach ourselves from everything else. So if we really want to be detached, don't witness anything other than the witness. In other words, attend to yourself, hold on to yourself, hold on to your own being. See the seer, as Bhagavan often used to say.
The next question is about Sadhu Om. Sadhu Om says in the first sentence of verse 247 of Sadhanai Saram, when will a real love for self arise in you? Whatever your intellect decides to be the greatest and most worthy thing, for that thing alone will a love arise in you. The question is, does that imply that our intellect has the power to direct our will, even if our will is subtler and therefore more powerful than our intellect?
Both. The intellect is an instrument. So if we have strong outward going desires, we will use our intellect to know the external world. If we have love to turn within, the same intellect we can use in the form of viveka. Viveka is distinguishing the real from the unreal, the eternal from the ephemeral. So if we have viveka, that's it. Viveka is using our intellect in the correct way to distinguish ourselves, the awareness, from all that is, or from all objects, from all phenomena. So the drikdrisya viveka, distinguishing the seer from the seen. Nitya vastu viveka, distinguishing the permanent from the ephemeral. So this is all a function of the intellect, but the intellect is an instrument we are using. So the will is more powerful than the intellect, but we can use our intellect to increase our love to know ourselves. If we think deeply about Bhagavan's teachings, that will give us the love to know ourselves. So there we're using the intellect to think about, to make sense of Bhagavan's teachings in order to kindle more love in our heart. But if we can, the amount of love we can kindle by just by Sravana and Manana, by studying Bhagavan's teachings and by thinking about them carefully, that is only a very limited extent we can only to a limited extent we can kindle that love. To really kindle a strong love, the practice, the abhyasa, the nididhyasana is absolutely necessary. We need to try more and more to turn within. So the real application of viveka, drikdrishya viveka, is not just understanding conceptually the difference between the seer and the seen. Having understood the difference between seer and the seen, we need to try to hold on to the seer. Forget about the seen, hold on to the seer. Having understood the difference between what is permanent and what is impermanent, we need to hold on to what is permanent. So that's the practical application of the viveka, is self-attentiveness. So we're using our intellect, but our intellect is being guided by the love to know ourselves, but it's being planted in our heart by Bhagavan's grace.
Namaskar. The next question. Namaskara, Michael. Could you clarify the practice of self-investigation? Particularly, how do we turn our attention to the I? I know I am, but it's hard to pay attention to that I, because it has no location and no form. I'm worried that I'm attending to a concept of I or the person, not to the ego. Besides, ego is the subject, so how can it pay attention to itself, let alone hold on to itself? Any clarification would help.
How can we hold on to ourselves? We are always aware of ourselves. We are always aware I am. So what we actually are is not a form. It has no location. But the one thing we are more clearly aware of than any other thing is our own being. It is like Bhagavan sometimes compared it to the screen in a cinema. We go to a cinema, sit there for 2 or 3 hours looking at a screen, but we fail to notice the screen because we're so interested in the pictures that are appearing on the screen. Likewise, our own being, that fundamental awareness I am, is ever shining. It's ever the background to all our experience, but we're constantly overlooking it. So we need to try slowly to take interest, not in the pictures, but in the screen. That is not in anything, but not in so many things appear and disappear in our life. So many experiences pass by. What they call the stream of consciousness, which is not stream of consciousness at all. It's a stream of phenomena that appear in consciousness. So our whole life is a stream of phenomena. We need to lose interest in that stream of phenomena and cultivate interest in the background screen, fundamental awareness I am. How we can do so, we can learn only by practice. That is, Bhagavan's words have pointed us in the right direction. All we need to attend to is to our own being, to that fundamental awareness I am. And he's expressed it in so many different ways. But however he's expressed it, his words are all pointers. We need to think carefully to understand what he's pointing at, and then we need to try to apply it in practice. The only way to learn to investigate ourselves is to try to investigate ourselves. The more we do it, the clearer it will become. But even when it becomes clear what it is we have to attend to, or at least even when we gain a certain degree of clarity, then we come to the real difficulty, which is we lack the love to attend to our own being. We are much more interested in watching the. We paid we bought our ticket to go to the cinema, not to watch the screen, but to look at the pictures, because we're more interested in the pictures than in the background. So this is the problem with us. This interest in the pictures is what is called the Vishaya Vasanas. We're interested in all the myriad phenomena of this world. What is happening? What's the weather? What's the political news? What's this? What's that? What's happening in our life? How we're going to pay our bills? How we're going to how I'm going to get a promotion at work? How I'm going to pass my exam? How I'm going to do this? How I'm going to secure a nice retirement for myself? How I'm going to take care of my family and this problem, that problem. We are so interested in, our life is full of so many preoccupations. The one thing we always overlook is our own being. Because whatever may happen, whether there's a war or a famine, whether there's birth or death, whatever may happen, whether we're awake or whether we're dreaming or whether we're asleep, the one thing that is constant, the constant background to all experience, is the underlying reality of the experiencer, namely the fundamental awareness I am. The experiencer is that same awareness I am, mixed and conflated with adjuncts as I am Michael, I am this person, I am this body. That is the experiencer. When we're investigating ourselves, we're trying to investigate the reality of this experiencer. So who am I, to whom all these things appear? And we go back to our being. So the words can only point us. We ourselves have to find out how to apply these words in practice. That is why Bhagavan called this vichara. He used many other words, vichara means investigation. He used so many other words in Tamil that mean investigation. Nadu means investigate. Araichi is investigation. There's so many words he used, but so he's constantly using words that mean investigate or investigation. Why? Because we can know how to investigate ourselves only by investigating ourselves. When you start off an investigation, you don't initially know where it's going to lead. It's only when you gather that this isn't an investigation like an external investigation, because in external investigation, we gather information. And the more information we gather, the clearer the idea we get of the direction. This is a far more subtle investigation, but it's an investigation nonetheless. We're not gathering information, but by looking within more and more, we gather more and more clarity. And the way becomes clearer and clearer. So what is necessary is to keep on trying to attend to our own being. Words have a limited power, but words can point us in the right direction, but it's up to us to understand what those words are pointing at. That's why mere śravaṇē is not sufficient. Manana is necessary. We need to make sense of Bhagavan's words. We need to understand what he means when he says attend to yourself. When he says fix your mind on yourself, what does he actually mean by that? We have to think about it carefully and try to apply it in practice. Thinking about it carefully, trying to make sense of it, is what is called manana. The actual trying to apply what we've understood is the nididhyasana, the actual practice of self-investigation, of self-attentiveness.
Michael, we have about 7 questions.
Okay.
So I'll try and
yeah.
make them fairly quickly. The next one is very similar, basically, to the one just answered, which is, how can we attend to a formless self with a mind which is limited by name and form?
what is attending is not the name and form. What is attending is awareness. That is, attention is a focusing of our awareness. So rather than focusing our awareness on anything other than ourselves, we're focusing it on ourselves. In other words, we're focusing awareness on awareness. We as awareness are attending to ourselves as awareness. And awareness is our being. Awareness and being are not two different things. That is, awareness is what we actually are. So awareness is our being. So though awareness is formless, the one thing we as awareness are always aware of is ourself, ourself as awareness. These things will become clearer. That is, so long as we're just using words, the words are always inadequate. We can get clarity what those words are pointing at, what is meant by awareness, what is meant by attention, what is meant by our being. It becomes clear only to the extent to which we put it into practice. If we don't put it into practice, then these are all mere words. The words are useful only to the extent to which they point us in the right direction. But we need to go in the right direction. We need to go in the direction the words are pointing at, pointing towards, that back towards ourself, our own being, our fundamental awareness, I am.
The following question is, why did Bhagwan make an exception of Arunachala as the one form that embodies Brahman? Though I'm aware that language creates contradictions, this seems similar to the contradiction of saying the heart is at the right hand of the chest, and at the same time that the heart is not in reality in time and space. Why have the one exception of Arunachala? Perplexing.
Well, regarding the heart, Bhagavan made it clear heart is nothing but pure awareness. We ourselves are the heart. Well, heart is our own reality. Regarding the heart on the right-hand side, that is obviously the word heart is being used in a different sense. Bhagavan mentioned that for those who are so centered on the body, they wanted to know, where is the heart in the body? So relative to the body, that is, but this place 2 digits to the center of the chest, that is not the abode of Brahman, obviously not. It is the abode of ego, we can say. That is, for ego, it's ego that is aware of this body and that is aware of this body as I. So ego, though we feel, if you touch my hand, I feel you've touched me. So every part of the body we feel as I, but where is the center of this I am this body feeling? It is here. But that's all relative to the body. That is not the heart in the deeper sense in which Bhagavan used it. So that's just to set that aside. Regarding Arunachala, that is, there are many different names and forms of God. God can have any number of names and forms. God is actually beyond name and form. But for spiritual practice, though there are many different names and forms of God, there's what is called Ishtadeva. Ishtadeva means when we are following the path of bhakti, though we know that all these different names and forms of God are one, Rama, Krishna, Shiva, Vishnu, Ganapati, Subramanya, Devi, Lakshmi, Saraswati, so Durga, Kali, all these, so many different names and forms of God, Ramakrishna, Ramana, Jesus, so many different names and forms of God. So if we are worshipping all these different names and forms of God, our attention is scattered. So it is natural when we're going deeper in the path of bhakti. You see many people, many devotees, that is, many more worldly devotees, they will go to every temple they can and they'll worship every god. And thinking this God will solve this problem, this God will solve that problem. Just in case this God doesn't help me, let me worship that God and then that God. So the mind is scattered. As we go deeper in the path of bhakti, the mind naturally gravitates to one particular name and form of God. If you see the lives of any great saints, they may worship, that is, some worship Krishna, some worship Rama, some worship Shiva, some worship Panduranga, different names and forms of God. But all saints will focus on one. There's something about Hanuman once said, though I know that Srinata, Srinata means Vishnu. Sri is Lakshmi, and Srinata is Vishnu, the Lord of Sri. Though I know that Srinata and I can't remember how he referred to Rama. Though I know they are the one, my heart is only for Rama. That is, he knows that Rama and Vishnu are one, but his heart is drawn only to Rama. There's a similar verse, Murughana, in one of his verses in Ramana Bodham, he said, "It is not that I do not know, but all names and forms are one. All the different gods are one. But though I know this, my heart goes only after Shiva Ramana." That is, he's drawn only to that form of Shiva in the particular form of Ramana. So this is natural when love when love is intensified, it's focused more and more on one. And eventually, so long as we are worshipping a name and form of God, there's still two there. There's the worshipper and the worshipped. So the bhakti is the longing for the worshipper to lose himself or herself in the worshipped. So that inclination towards one. So for Bhagavan's Ishtadeva, we can say, is Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala is his Ishtadeva, God, his guru, everything. Sometimes they say Mata Pita Guru Devam, mother, father, God, guru. Guru God, sorry. So it's natural for the mind to come to one. So for Bhagavan, the form of God that attracted his heart is this name and form of Aruṇācala. We can say it's due to Purva his previous lives, he would have been a devotee of Aruṇācala. That's one way of explaining it. But another way of explaining it is Bhagavan is Aruṇācala in human form. That is, Aruṇācala Shiva has appeared in the human form of Bhagavan. So they're one. So there's a natural affinity, a natural liking. But it ultimately, I mean, Bhagavan has said so much about the greatness of Aruṇācala. That is about the unique power of Aruṇācala to draw the mind within. And he says in verse 10 of Aruṇācala Patikam, but I've seen a wonder, this magnetic hill that forcibly attracts the soul. The soul stopping the cheshte, the activity, the mischievous activity, mental activity of the soul, who thinks of it even once, drawing it within to face itself and making it motionless like itself, and then feeding upon that pure soul. he describes this is how the grace of Aruṇācala works. O souls, be saved by thinking of this great Arunagiri who shines in the heart as the killer of the soul. So though Bhagavan is seemingly worshipping the external name and form of God, he never ceases to emphasize that what appears outwardly in the form of Aruṇācala is what is ever shining in the heart as I, as the light of awareness.
Next question. Growing up, I was always told and believed change is the only constant in life. But Bhagwan's teachings have shown me that in fact the I we refer to ourselves as is the unchanging constant in experience, as all perceptions are relative to it. Across all spiritual teachings, was Bhagwan the first to explicitly isolate and throw a spotlight onto the nature of it?
No, this is as old as the Upanishads, and they go back, we can't say how long, because that is, as I said earlier, one of the first qualification, it is in classical Advaita, it is said the first qualification for following this spiritual path is Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka, distinguishing the eternal from the ephemeral. Everything is ephemeral. As Buddha said, Anitya, Nitya, Sarvam Anitya. How do you say it? Nitya, yeah, Nitya, Nitya, Sarvam Anitya. Kshanikam, Kshanikam, Sarvam Kshanikam. Everything is, not only is it impermanent, it's momentary. Dukkam, Dukkam, Sarvam Dukkam. Therefore, everything is suffering. But that's all phenomena. They're all impermanent. Not only is the phenomena impermanent, the knower of all the phenomena is impermanent. The knower of all phenomena is ego. Ego appears in waking and dream, disappears in sleep. So it is impermanent. But there's an underlying reality, because though ego is absent in sleep, we don't cease to be aware of our own being. This is what Bhagavan says in verse 21 of 21 of Upadesha Undiya. Nanenam sotporul amadu nalame nanatra tukotomunme undipara namadimme nikatal undipara. That is, that he's referring to what he was talking about in the previous verse. That is always the true import of the word I, because of the absence of our non-existence in sleep, which is devoid of I. He says always is the true import of I. So what I actually is that which is present even when I is absent. So what does that mean? The I that is absent in sleep is ego. But even in the absence of ego, we, the real I, do not cease to exist. In other words, we are constant. So Bhagavan has pointed this out, but it's also pointed out in that's what Vedanta is all about, is about pointing out to that which is, everything is ephemeral, but behind it all, underlying it all, there is one underlying reality that is permanent. So it is true, everything in the sense of all phenomena, not only all phenomena, even the knower of all phenomena, all are impermanent. But underlying the knower of phenomena, the underlying reality of the knower is permanent. That is the pure awareness I am. Whether we're awake, when we're awake, I am awake, we're aware. When we're dreaming, I am dreaming. Well, we don't think we're dreaming, we think we're awake when we think we're awake when we're dreaming. But the same I that is what shines in waking as I, what shines in dream as I, does not entirely cease to exist in sleep. So that I that continues even in sleep, that is what we actually are. The I that disappears in sleep, that is the adjunct conflated awareness. But whereas the pure I, devoid of adjuncts, is what continues in sleep. So that is what is permanent. So it's been pointed out in so many ways in all of Vedanta, in the Upanishads, in the Brahma Sutra, in the Bhagavad Gita. It's constantly being pointed out. Krishna's pointing it out in the second chapter. There's something that doesn't cease to exist. And he says in verse 16, there's no existence of what doesn't exist, and there's no non-existence of what does exist. What that means is what actually exists must always exist. What doesn't always exist, but this is how Bhagavan put it. Bhagavan put it very nicely. I mean, the same idea, but he said, anything that exists at one time and not at another time doesn't actually exist even when it seems to exist. So if something comes into existence and ceases to exist, it doesn't actually exist. It's borrowing its existence from something else. Only that which exists eternally is intrinsically existent. That is our own being.
Hi, Michael. I asked the question. Could I just quickly follow up?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just mentioning because there's nothing in the Upanishads of the Gita that kind of explicitly points to the I. And as I said, aham, you say aham brahmasmi, but aham itself, like it feels like that is a universal pointer that would resonate with anybody and everyone in terms of in their own languages. In this one I, all phenomena is ultimately relative to this I. So the investigation of that I is kind of the ultimate pointer. And it doesn't, there's nothing in the Vedanta prior to Bhagavan's teachings that kind of explicitly points that out. From what I can see.
If we understand Bhagavan's teachings, we can see that what Bhagavan is pointing out so clearly has been pointed out in all the ancient texts, but it's been overlooked.
But not with reference to aham.
As you say, aham brahmasmi. What does that mean?
It doesn't isolate. It doesn't isolate aham though. It says aham brahmasmi, I am God, but it doesn't isolate the aham component.
Well, no. What that is saying is, it is equating I and Brahman. So they're not two things. If you say I am Krish, there are not two things there. I am Krish. By saying I am Krish, you're equating I and Krish. You're saying that I and Krish are one and the same thing. So when they say aham brahmasmi, that means there is no I other than Brahman, and there's no Brahman other than I. So it is there, but what is special about Bhagavan's teachings? That is often people who studied all these Upanishads and Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and so many commentaries and everything, people overlook the practical implication of all these things. What Bhagavan has made so clear is what is the practical implication of all these things. If I am Brahman, then what should I meditate on? I should meditate only on I. Because if I meditate on Brahman, so long as I don't experience myself as Brahman, Brahman is just an idea. So why it is pointed out, Tattvamasi, you yourself are that. Once we understand that there's no Brahman other than I, what should we meditate on? We should meditate only on I. But people miss the point. I am not this body, I am Brahman. They go on thinking. But so Bhagavan has made very, very clear what is the practical implication of all these things. Not only has Bhagavan made it very clear, in order to, as part of that process of making it very clear, Bhagavan has simplified things. Because often it was, that is, there are so many ways of explaining these things, but the more explanations you give, often but the explanations, rather than clarifying, they confuse things. So Bhagavan has simplified things. He's explained everything in an extremely simple way. Like I was saying earlier, in the Upanishads, it said everything is Brahman. Bhagavan says ego itself is everything. Seemingly a contradiction, but if we understand it, Bhagavan is actually making it clear. So long as we see everything, we who see everything are ego. Everything exists only in the view of ego. Everything has no, all phenomena have no existence whatsoever independent of ego. But the underlying reality of ego is Brahman. So by emphasizing the role of ego in the whole mess that we're in, that the root of all our problems is ego, that Bhagavan has greatly simplified and clarified. So Bhagavan himself said, there's nothing he's taught that is not there already in the ancient texts. But what he has done is he has clarified it. The way he's taught, that is, he's not teaching something new. He's teaching the same ancient truth, but he's teaching it in a very fresh and clear way.
I totally agree, James. Thank you.
Fresh, clear, and extremely practical way he's explained it all.
So the question is the inner dissatisfaction with existence or vague knowingness that something is just not right, about this a manifestation of grace?
Yes, but what we're dissatisfied with is not existence. Our present state of existence, our embodied existence, is what we're dissatisfied with. That is, this embodied existence is what causes all problems. But our existence, in the sense of our being, that we are never dissatisfied with. We always, we all love ourselves, as Bhagavan says. Everyone has greatest love for themselves. Even someone who commits suicide, though it seems that they're killing themselves, they're killing this body which is causing them so much trouble. So we are all dissatisfied with this state of this embodied existence. Embodied existence is what is called samsara. We are all dissatisfied with this. Why are we dissatisfied? Because what we actually are is infinite happiness. As a finite embodied being, we can never experience infinite happiness. So we always, nothing that we can experience as an embodied being can ever satisfy us, because nothing short of infinite happiness will satisfy us. So Ramakrishna said, the fact that we're all dissatisfied is itself the indication that what we actually are is Brahman. What we actually are is infinite. So nothing finite can satisfy us. And so long as we take ourselves to be finite, so long as we take ourselves to be this body, we experience ourselves as finite. I was born so many years in the past, and sometime in the future I'm going to die. I'm limited in time. I'm limited in space. I'm only here. I'm not there. So we are limited in so many ways. I'm this thing, not that thing. So we're limited. That's the limitation of vastu. We are one thing and not other things. So we are limited in so many ways. So we're inevitably dissatisfied. However, though we're all dissatisfied, we look for satisfaction in the wrong place. We continue looking for satisfaction in external things. Where grace comes in is when we cease to look for satisfaction in the transient things of the world, and we look for satisfaction in that which is permanent, namely our own being. That is grace. Or as a sort of intermediate stage between seeking happiness in worldly things and seeking happiness in our own being, there's seeking happiness in God. Taking God to be something other than ourselves, but taking God to be the ultimate reality, the highest of all, we seek happiness in God. so long as we take God to be something other than ourselves, we don't know him as he actually is. So God then, by his grace, he appears in the form of Guru to tell us the God you're seeking is within you, is your own reality. Seek that God within you. So we all start seeking satisfaction from the world. When we're frustrated with the world, we begin to seek satisfaction in what is beyond the world, God. But so long as we take God to be other than ourselves, we're still in a finite state. There's us and God. And we make God by finite by taking him to be other than ourselves. So when we're finally told God is your own reality, God is ever shining in you as I, then we begin to seek him within our own heart.
The next question is, can we equate the term divine will and divine intelligence with Brahman?
That is, God and his will are not two different things. God, ambe shivam, love alone is Shiva. God is love. So the will of God is infinite love that he has for himself. And since God doesn't see us as other than himself, he has infinite love for us as himself. That we call the will of God or grace of God. But that is obviously not other than God. God is that love itself. So yes, we can equate the will of God with Brahman. I mean, they're one and the same thing. That is, Brahman is nothing but infinite love. About intelligence, intelligence is a function. Nowadays, we even have intelligent machines. So intelligence is not to say God is intelligence is a bit. It's not really understand. God is God is awareness. The awareness of God, that is the awareness that is God, that is Brahman. God is nothing but he's Sat Chit Ananda. That Chit aspect is Brahman. That Ananda aspect is the love aspect. Ananda, that is happiness and love are one. As Bhagavan says, happiness alone is. Yes, happiness alone is the cause of love, and love alone is the cause of happiness. So the love is the Ananda aspect, the awareness is the Chit aspect, and being is the Sat aspect. They're all ultimately, they're not three different things. That is, Sat is Chit, Chit is Sat, and Sat Chit is Ananda, Ananda is Sat Chit. So they're three words to describe the same thing. Brahman is Sat Chit Ananda, which is one.
The next question. The next question is, when uncomfortable vasanas arise and I'm watching them. Sorry. When uncomfortable vasanas arise and I'm watching them, not reacting, it then sometimes feels, or I think, that I'm suppressing them. How to be sure I'm not suppressing?
That is, vasanas rise. Vasanas are inclinations. When we are swayed by an inclination, we act in a certain way. Act means by mind, speech, or body. We are not suppressing the vasanas. What we are doing is so many vasanas are always rising. Rather than allowing ourselves to be swayed by any Vishaya vasanas, we are trying to be swayed only by the Sat vasana. Being swayed by satvasana means attending to ourselves. So we are not suppressing the vasanas. The vasanas will continue rising, but the more we attend to ourselves, the more the sattvasana will increase in strength and the Vishaya vasanas will lose their strength. We are not to watch the vasanas. To whom are all these vasanas? Who has this inclination to think about this or that, or who has the inclination to experience this or that? Who has the inclination to seek happiness in this or that? We are trying to turn our attention away from the inclination to the one whose inclination it is, namely ourselves.
The next question. Given the background of non-dual reality and single consciousness, did these great epics, Ramayana, etc., really happen, or are these just given as guidance to live a better life?
Is our present life happening? If our present life is real, then why shouldn't all those stories be real? They are as real as our present life. The ultimate truth is nothing has ever happened. The reality is not doing or happening, the reality is being. But so long as we rise as ego, we seem to be caught up in a world of happenings. And in this world of happenings, we have these wonderful stories, Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are full of, it's not just the stories. Behind those stories, there's so many teachings are given. There's so many tattvas, so many implications. Those stories can be interpreted in so many different ways. If you go to popular storytelling, there's a katha. They'll be telling the story, for example, of sometimes they have 7-day kathas telling the story of Bhagavatam, or they can be focusing on particular aspects of the Mahabharata, which is a vast, vast ocean, which would take weeks and weeks to go through the whole Mahabharata, or they talk about the life of Rama, or all these different, or they also, there are things where they talk about the lives of different saints. All of these, the people who tell these stories, they will give interpretation, and their interpretation will be suited to the audience. So most people, they need to be taught to live a good life, to be honest, not to cheat people, not to do bad things. So often these popular storytelling events, the people who tell these stories, they'll be drawing good morals, how to live a good life, how to live a pious life, how to you should worship God, you shouldn't be greedy for material things. They'll teach good things. But the same stories can be told in a much deeper way. Much deeper meaning can be drawn from the story. So according to the teacher and according to the taught, the same stories can be different meanings, different implications can be drawn from the same stories. I used to hear Sadhu telling stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata to children. And he told it in such a nice way. He would bring the stories alive, and he would capture the children's imagination. But the way he was explaining the stories was suited to the children. But he also told me many of these stories, and he drew out much, much deeper meaning. So these are not just stories. They're full of so much teachings are included in these stories. Practical teachings for how we live in this world, how that is both all these texts. One thing they're all teaching is dharma, but they're also teaching how complex dharma is. That is, the Mahabharata is full of so many situations where Bhishma, for example, he made a very noble vow so that his father could marry the girl he loved. He took a vow that he would never marry. But that in the end led to so much, or the whole story evolved around that and all the complications that arose out of that. So it shows how complex life in this world is. But there's also so much deep spiritual meaning in these stories. The Bhagavad Gita is itself a part of the Mahabharata. And the Bhagavad Gita is not the only deep spiritual text. There's the Sujatyam and so many other very deep discourses are given in these epics and these Puranas. So they're no less real than the world we live in. In many ways, they're more meaningful than the world we live in. But they're very applicable to the world, also very applicable to the world we live in. How we should live in this world. What should be our real goal in life. All these things are taught there. So these are not just stories. These are very, very profound scriptures in the form of stories.
So we have the self-enquiry. I mean, as long as the thoughts arise, we keep finding the source of the thoughts. It subsides. We hold on to it. So every thought stops without manifesting into an action. So the energy to hold on to all these thoughts increases. The mind to abide in the source, it keeps on increases. After a particular time, when all the vasanas exhaust, then the self rushes forward to pull that individual mind and grant that enlightenment, isn't it? The seer, the seeing, and the seen, the triad disappears, isn't it?
Yes. That is obviously it is beyond words. But that is the one who sets out to investigate who am I is our self as ego. But ego can never know what it actually is, because ego is the false awareness. I am Raghu, I am Michael, I am whoever. So what is called self-realization is nothing but the permanent dissolution of this ego. Manonasa, destruction of the mind. So what realizes itself is what always knows itself. So that is what remains knowing itself is what always knows itself. So it is nothing but the dissolution of ego. So it is all brought about. Yes, we can say it is by the grace of but the grace is not something other than that is our own reality, and the grace of our reality are not two different things. So we are swallowed by that grace, so to speak. Bhagavan says beautifully in Ulladu in I think verse 22. Yes, 22 of Ulladu Unadal Khan. Becoming food is seeing. So it's only when we are swallowed by that infinite light of pure awareness that we remain as pure awareness, which eternally knows itself.
Even at this moment, this present moment, we are all the same impersonal awareness, that infinite light, right? But we are unable to recognize it, isn't it, Michael? We hold on to the body so much.
We all know ourselves. There is never a moment when we do not know ourselves, because what we actually are is that fundamental awareness I am. However, when we rise as ego, though we know ourselves, we do not know ourselves as we actually are, because we know ourselves as I am this body. So the real awareness is I am. Superimposed on that is this false awareness, I am this body. That is ego. When that is removed, when that is dissolved, when it surrenders itself, what remains is just the pure awareness I am, which is Brahman or Atma-swarupa or God or whatever we want to call it. That is Bhagavan.
In the deep sleep, the blankness has been, that's what it's been witnessed. I mean,
No. Sleep appears to be a blankness only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream. In sleep, there is no blankness. In sleep, there is just awareness of being, Satchit. It's only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream where we say, oh, sleep was a state of, of blankness. But in sleep, we are not aware of any blankness. In sleep, all we're aware of is I am, our own being.
Existing.
Yeah. Has that answered your question?
It answered, it clarified, because all this while I was thinking waking state, then we have a dream state, and then there is a deep sleep, which is a blankness. Yet all the three are being witnessed by that pure consciousness, which is that impersonal awareness.
No, the pure consciousness is only aware of itself. It's not aware of anything else. The three states exist only in the view of ego.
Okay.
But sleep is actually a state of pure awareness. Sleep is the eternal state, it's the background, from which arise ego in waking and dream. But from the perspective of ego, sleep seems to be one among three states. So it seems to be defective. It seems to be impermanent. It seems to be a temporary state. Sleep is defective only from the perspective of ego, because from the perspective of ego, sleep has a beginning and it has an end.
Yes.
But actually, sleep has no beginning and end. Sleep is eternal. It is the rising of ego in waking and dream that makes the non-rising of ego in sleep, makes that seem to be a third state. But actually, all that exists in sleep is that eternal Satchit. So when we are investigating ourselves in the waking or dream state, we are turning our attention back to that fundamental awareness and subsiding back into that. If we in sleep, when we go to sleep because of tiredness. So though all what exists and shines in sleep is only Satchit, but that doesn't destroy ego, because that Satchit remains alone after the subsidence of ego. So in order to bring about the destruction of ego, ego needs to experience itself as Satchit. But ego can never experience itself as Satchit, because as soon as ego experiences itself as Satchit, it ceases to be ego and remains as Satchit. So the difference between manolaya and manonasha, that any temporary dissolution of mind is manolaya. That is sleep, swoon, general anesthesia, coma, nirvikalpa samadhi. These are all temporary dissolution of mind. They are all brought about by some means other than knowing ourselves. Sleep is brought about by tiredness. General anesthesia is brought about by drugs. Coma may be brought about by some brain injury or something. Swoon may be brought about because of excessive heat or something. Nirvikalpa samadhi is brought about by pranayama and other yogic exercises. So because they are brought about by some means other than knowing ourselves, they are temporary. So we rise again. Manonasa is permanent dissolution of mind, permanent dissolution of ego. That is brought about by ego experiencing itself as Sat-Chit. Because as soon as ego experiences itself as Sat-Chit, it ceases to be ego and remains as Sat-Chit. In other words, ego is a false awareness of ourself. I am this body. I am Raghu. I am Michael. That is a false awareness. When we are aware of ourselves as I am I, nothing other than I, we then cease to be ego and remain as we actually are. So it's only by, that's why it is said in classical Advaita, it is only by vidya that avidya can be destroyed. But the vidya that it will bring about, the avidya is nothing but ego, the false awareness, I am this body. The vidya is nothing but the correct awareness, I am I. Nānāne. Aham.
The self-enquiry and the surrender are not two other things. It looks same, you know.
Yeah, well, we can begin to surrender, even on the path of devotion, where we're worshipping God as something other than ourselves. We understand that our will is what stands between us and God. We want to surrender ourselves to the will of God, but we have likes and dislikes and desires and attachment. So surrender begins by trying to surrender our will, because we recognize that our will is what stands between us and God. But we cannot surrender our will completely without surrendering ego, whose will it is. So we can surrender our will to a certain extent on the path of bhakti. Bhakti meaning bhakti, anya bhakti, let's say. Bhakti for God as another. But we can surrender the will completely only when we surrender ego. And we can surrender ego only by means of self-investigation. So self-investigation is the culmination of the path of surrender. So Bhagavan's path is the ultimate path, is the culmination of the path of bhakti. So bhakti and jnana are not two different paths. The path of bhakti, the blossoming of the power of bhakti, the path of bhakti is the path of jnana.
Oh, I recognize it, Michael, because I used to do yoga, different kriyas, and then I used to go into that silence at the last moment, and it used to continue. But then again, all the vasanas start to come, and I'm the same as the same inclination arises.
That's what Bhagavan said in the eighth paragraph. Okay,
every moment I have this. I'm like aware of why this is, and again I investigated. Okay, this thought is arising, and why it is arising, and to the source, and then it stops. So I can hold back, and the silence remains throughout it. But yet there are no thoughts, but yet that is still under the perception of the mind. It's blankness. Like if I close my eyes, there are no thoughts. I continue to go along for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but then that's all I can go.
The blankness that you call is itself a thought. The one who experiences the blankness is itself a thought. Ego is a thought. Ego is the first thought, what Bhagavan calls the nanenam ninevu, the thought called I. So we are not, in such states, we are not experiencing, it's not a state devoid of thoughts. Maybe the mental activity is reduced there, but there's still subtle mental activity. So we need to hold on to our being, that the more we attend to our own being, the more ego thereby subsides. And to the extent ego subsides, all mental activity will subside along with it. When we attend to ourselves keenly enough, ego will subside and dissolve permanently in its source. So our aim isn't to experience to be devoid of thought. That is, in yoga, the aim is chitta vritti nirodha. That is not the aim in self-investigation. The aim in self-investigation is to know who am I. In other words, to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. Chitta-vritti nirodha will happen as a result of that. But chitta-vritti nirodha is not our aim. That's why Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nana, etane eningalerinomenna. However many thoughts arise, so what? As and when each thought arises, it's necessary to investigate to whom it is arisen. If we investigate to whom it is arisen, it'll be clear to me. And if we then hold on to that me, that he says, if we investigate who am I, that is, investigating to whom means turning our attention back to ourselves. Investigating who am I means holding on to that. Having turned our attention back to ourselves, we try to hold on to that. And he says, if you hold on to that, the mind will return to its birth, its pirapitam, its birthplace. And the thought that have risen will also subside. So the chitta-vritti nirodha happens, but as a byproduct. Chitta-vritti nirodha is not our aim. It's a byproduct. Our aim is to know ourselves. If we, by holding on to that self-attentiveness, ego subsides. And by ippidi paraka paraka, manataku tan pirapiditil tangi nikkam shakti adi kadikindrudu. By practicing and practicing in this way, the strength of the mind, for the mind, the strength to remain subsided in its source increases. So don't worry about thoughts. Whatever thought may appear, to whom it does appear. Don't worry about blank. To whom does the blank appear? So our aim should be to constantly try to turn our attention deeper and deeper within.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Well, all thanks to Bhagavan. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai.